There he is.
Hello there. Welcome on board. And we just started our recording. We're continuing our discussion on the strategic guide for achieving lasting peace in Israel, Make Peace by Alicia Pearl. Really phenomenal book. And if you haven't read it, even after the class, you should get it because it covers so much more and it goes into much more detail, including specific
It
a
does.
lot of references. So it's really
Well, if
good.
you could just find the time to read it, Judy?
Yep, that's true. So tonight, what we're going to cover, actually, this I want to say this chapter is called "The Soul of the Struggle," and that's really it comes down to a lot of things. But as we get into this one, I want to discuss something first. It's on a metacognitive level on this one, which is how we're doing this, right? One of the things Lubavitcher Rebbe was very interesting in the way he was doing this was he would take a topic and he would suggest a solution, and then he would prove why that's not a good solution. Then he would suggest another solution to that Talmudic problem, and then prove that why that's not a good solution. And he'd go through that 3 or 4 different ways. And then when you're thoroughly lost, like, okay, there's no possible solution, right? Then he'll bring up something that precedes the question even and removes the whole shaklavatari, the whole back and forth discussion in a sense, because the question didn't make sense to begin with, right? And that the capacity to go to the heart of the issue, that's one of the hallmarks of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and specifically Hasidic teaching, is to go deep into the heart of the issue. And from that place, oftentimes the questions don't even arise. The questions don't make sense. And part of that we're going to get to today, because this whole question about, like, what are Jews even doing in the land of Israel altogether? How do we justify our presence and the ongoing struggle over the land? Like, what's that all about to begin with, right? So, and that's what we want to tackle today. Now, next class, we'll look at, yeah, but, and deal with all those concerns as well, right? But today we're going to go back and forth with, again, some of the narratives that people tell about Jews in Israel, and try and make sense of that, right? So, the Jewish claim to the land. God appeared, this is Genesis 12:7. God appeared to Abraham and said, I will give this land to you and your offspring. So, Exodus 32:13. Remember Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, your servants, to whom you swore and said, I shall multiply your offspring like the stars of the heaven, and this entire land of which I have spoken, I will give to your offspring, and they shall inherit forever. So what we're talking about is a divine promise. And we're going to look back at that divine promise from the very beginning, right? So the Jewish people's connection with Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, also called Eretz HaKodesh, the Holy Land, begins with this biblical patriarch, Abraham, some 4,000 years ago. In the Torah, God commands Avram, Lech lecha me'artzecha me'moladetecha bebeis avicha. Leave from your home, your birthplace, from your land, and go to the place that I will show you. And he migrates to Eretz Canaan, the land of Canaan, which God promises to give to Avram and to his descendants as an eternal inheritance. Once Avram arrives in Eretz Yisrael, the Holy Land, God tells Avram, look around from where you are, to the north, to the south, to the east, and the west. Kol haaretz, all that land you see, I will give to you and to your offspring forever. And then he affirms this promise, declaring, I have given this land to your descendants from the river of Egypt, the Nile, to the great river, Euphrates, the land of the Canaani, Kenizi, Kadmoni, Hitti, Perizi, Yaphardi, Yephatites, Amoraim, Canaanim, Girgishim, and Jebusim. It labels it out, just plays it all right. God further emphasizes the eternal and unconditional nature of this promise, and at the Bris HaBesarim. So let's talk about Bris HaBesarim for a minute. Bris means a covenant. Ben HaBesarim means between the parts. Nowadays, in our world, when you make a contract is written up, it is signed, and it's signed by the witnesses who watch the participants sign it. And this creates a binding document, right? Over the years, that's been done in different ways. Back in Abraham's time, a covenant was where they would take animals and they would split the animals and lay them out, and the people of the covenant would then walk between the parts of these animals, and then they would sacrifice them, and then they would have a feast with it, and it was an event, right? But the establishing of a covenant was walking between the parts of the animal that will then be shared, right? So bris is a covenant. Bein habesarim is between the parts. And God made a covenant with Abraham, and they split the animals, and Abraham and a pillar of fire from Hashem walked between these. And the covenant was, God said, I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant between me and you and your descendants after you for the generations to come. I will be your God and the God of your descendants after you. The whole land of Canaan, where you now reside as a foreigner, I will give to you as an everlasting possession to you and your descendants after you, and I will be their God. So this covenant, this bris ben habesarim, was then passed down to Avram's son Yitzchak and to his grandson Yaakov, the patriarchs of the Jewish people. And when it came to Yaakov, the third of the generation, God tells him, I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, meaning all over the place, but meaning also as prevalent as multiple as the dust of the earth, where you can't even count them, right? Like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south, and all the people of the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. So that's the covenant that God then reiterates to Yaakov, the third of the patriarchs. Now, settling into this land. This doesn't happen immediately, right? You have the generations of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then you have the 12 tribes. And then there's this challenge. Let's hold right here. Jeff, go for it. You have your mic on. Jeff, go ahead. Put your mic on. Unmute. You have to unmute.
There
you go.
I was going to bring up the fact that Abraham's other kids are the Arabs, and they also get circumcised.
Yep.
Yes. Yes.
A little later than us.
And you'll see as we go through this that each one of them gets cut out from this covenant.
Okay.
And one thing it's not on the schedule to mention, but one of the interesting parts between the children of Jacob and the children of Esau is that God promises there's going to be some hard times, and you're going to go through the slavery and 400 years of servitude, and then you'll go out with great wealth. The children of Esau then come to try and claim the land of Israel, and Jacob's family says, well, there was a part about the slavery part. You're willing to go all in on this? And then they back off. Right? So there's a cost. And, if you're not willing to do the time. So after God miraculously brings the Jewish people out of the slavery of Egypt, leads them through the desert under Moses' guidance, then God reiterates his promise.
This is true.
God reiterates his promise to give them the land of Israel on numerous occasions as they prepare to enter the land, which is the parshas we're talking about even this week, right? In Torah, right? God declares, see, I have given you this land. Go in and take possession of the land of the Lord that he swore that he would give to your forefathers, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and to their descendants after them. Following Moshe's passing, Yeshua leads the Bnei Yisrael and conquers Eretz Canaan, defeating the Canaanite kings, taking possession of their land. And this marked the fulfillment of God's long-standing promise to their forefathers And it's recorded in the book of Joshua. The book of Joshua, so Yeshua took the whole land according to all that Lord had said to Moses, and Yeshua gave it as an inheritance to Yisrael according to their divisions by their tribes. So again, even after Moses is gone, you have the rediscussion of this piece, right? And furthermore, says, and the Lord gave to the people of Israel all the land which he had sworn to give to their fathers. They took possession of it and they dwelt in it. The Lord gave them rest all around, according to all that he had sworn to their fathers. Not a man of all their enemies stood against them. The Lord delivered all their enemies into their hands. Not a word failed of any good thing which God had spoken to the house of Israel. It all came to pass. So that's in Yeshua's time. Now, let's go further, right? From Yeshua's time and on, the Jewish people were the predominant population of Eretz Yisrael. Until the Roman conquest, like 1,500 years later, the Common Era, like 70 Common Era, the Romans destroyed the Second Temple in Jerusalem. And despite the tragedy, Jews still remained the dominant population in Israel for several decades. So we've been there and been there and been there. The exile, the gullus, the diaspora, things took a turn in 132 of the Common Era when the Jews launched the Bar Kokhba revolt, Bar Koziba revolt against Roman rule. They fought heroically about 3 years until the Romans brutally suppressed the rebellion, massacring and exiling a significant portion of the Jewish population. And this marked the beginning of the gullus, the exile that we now know as diaspora, which saw Jewish communities dispersed across the Middle East, across North Africa, and across Europe. This gullus, this diaspora's dynamics and the persecution caused the Jewish people to flee across the world, and hence the existence of large gullus communities across the world to this very day. So first it was to the areas nearby, the Middle East, North Africa, and Europe. But then as the anti-Semitism and the persecution continued in those areas, then it continued even farther out, spreading again across the whole world. Nonetheless, throughout this 2,000-year gullus, a small but continuous Jewish presence has remained in Eretz Yisrael, the Holy Land. Jews in gullus have retained a very deep connection to Eretz HaKodesh, the Holy Land, and this is driven by a heartfelt yearning, which has been made very difficult, but the heartfelt yearning for our ancestral homeland. It has never left that status of the homeland of the Jewish people. Amcha Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, it's inseparable. So Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, changed hands repeatedly during this period, with a region remaining partially populated. If you look at the population charts that have been drafted on this area during this time, it gets really, really bleak, right? Following the end of the Roman rule, the Byzantine Empire took control of the land until the rise of Islam in the 7th century. From that point onward, there was a succession of 8 ethnically diverse, warring Muslim empires that fought over the land. This area was punctuated by 2-century interlude of the Christian Crusades, and then the Muslim Egyptian Mumlaks reconquered the land from the Crusaders in 2060. They retained the land until 1516, when they were defeated by the Ottoman Turks, who then held on to the land for 400 years. Everybody wants this place, right? Every king wanted to have a palace in Israel. During these eras, the land's political landscape was in a constant state of flux. By the early 20th century, the total population of Eretz Yisrael had dwindled to levels even lower than those during the Roman Empire. The 19th century marked a turning point in the history of Eretz Yisrael. There were many Jews that tried to return to their ancestral homeland because of all of the anti-Semitism in Europe. In 1917, during the turmoil of World War I, the British Empire conquered the Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, from the Ottoman Empire. The British government subsequently issued the Balfour Declaration in 1917, promising to support the establishment of a Jewish homeland in the region. This commitment was further reinforced in 1939, the Peel White Papers, in which the British pledged to found a Jewish homeland in Eretz Yisrael. Now, the average Arab resident rejected all these proposals, responding with violent riots. Now, interestingly enough, throughout all the violent riots of the Arabs protesting Jewish time, individual Arab landowners continued to sell land to Jewish buyers.
Yeah.
The Arab leadership staunchly opposed this Jewish settlement. And by 1947, the United Kingdom had given up hope on trying to manage or resolve this escalating conflict, and they transferred the responsibility to the UN. In an attempt to address the competing claims of both peoples, a partition plan was suggested, 2 separate states, one Jewish and one Arab. The Jews accepted the partition plan, and the Arabs refused it categorically. And against that backdrop, Israel declared its own independence. In 1948, soon after Israel declared its independence, 5 Arab nations, dissatisfied with the UN's proposed partition plan, and maintaining that the entire territory from the river to the sea, was Arab land, they invaded Israel to attempt to annihilate the Jewish state. On the eve, I'm quoting their words, right? On the eve of the invasion, Azam Pasha, the general secretary of the Arab League, ominously predicted, these are his words, it will be a war of elimination and a dangerous massacre, which history will record, similar to the Mongol massacres and the wars of the Crusades. We will sweep the Jews into the sea. Direct quote. So we have no ambiguity left there. We know exactly what their thoughts are, right? Despite the overwhelming odds, Israel emerged miraculously, phenomenally victorious, defending its territory and actually reclaiming portions of biblical Israel. In the aftermath of the war, Judea and Samaria came under Jordanian control, and the Gaza Strip fell under Egyptian governance. Interesting to note that neither Jordan nor Egypt attempted to establish a Palestinian state in those regions, nor did they extend citizenship to the Arabs living there.
Yep.
Nobody wanted them.
Still don't.
2 decades later, 1967, the 6-Day War, Israel once again found itself facing a formidable Arab coalition, and again, a miraculous, stunning military campaign. Israel not only repelled the attacking force, but they also reclaimed the Gaza Strip, the Golan Heights, Judea, and Samaria, all parts of biblical Israel. These newly acquired territories included historically significant Jewish cities, such as Jerusalem, Hebron, Shechem, which is now called Nablus, which are all part of the heartland of Jewish Israel. So we've been there for a long, long time, longer than any other peoples have been there. If we judge by historical precedents alone to determine the rightful owner of the land of Israel, well, you have to say that the 7 Canaanite nations who inhabited the region in ancient times, they'd have the strongest claim as the earliest documented residents of the region. But they're gone. They're completely gone. So the Jewish people stand as the next candidate for the nation's most ancient claims to the land, right? Now, some claim that Muslims should be granted the rights to the land as they held it for an extended period more recently.
Yeah.
However, Israel's Muslim rulers were not a monolith. Although the land of Israel was under Muslim rule, it was different warring Muslim factions, not a continuous rule, and it was not politically or ethnically, because it was different Muslim groups vying for control. So governing the land over the course of the next 1,000 years. So in many instances, contemporary Islamist claims to land are actually at variance with actually facts and history. Jeff.
I hate to be the sore in your behind. But
Go for it.
we're the last tribe. We're the tribe of Judah. What happened to the other 11 tribes? Well, they got swallowed up by the people that are probably now Arabs. You know what I'm saying? They're descendants of well,
Right. So where those 10 tribes disappeared to and how they dissipated is not well documented. So we don't know exactly where all that went to. But as far as being Jewish people, yes, they're gone.
well, they're not. They don't believe in the same things we believe in. They believe in Muhammad as the
Well,
truth. Which we don't.
those that are Muslim, but I'm saying that they could have dispersed into lots of different locations, including all of Africa. So, it's not just there are many.
This is also very true.
Yes,
Yeah.
there are many African Americans or Black Americans who claim that they are the rightful Jewish people, and we're, etc. That's another conversation, another time.
I was asking a guy from the Ethiopian Council if we could get the Ark of the Covenant back.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, the Ark of the Covenant actually.
Or for that matter, the Egyptians who say the Exodus never happens, but they want the loot back. Can't
Yeah.
make this shit up.
Have that conversation with the British. That's another thing.
Yeah, they mucked everything up.
They want their jewelry back.
So we'll go back to this idea of the absurdity of competing historical claims, right? So the Lubavitcher Rebbe talked about the conflict of Moras HaMachpelah, the cave of the patriarchs, the place where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were buried with their spouses, and including Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava, the Moras HaMachpelah. It's located in the ancient city of Hebron. It is a Jewish heritage site where the patriarchs and matriarchs are buried. Jews have prayed at that site for over 3,000 years. However, during the time when it was under Muslim rule, the synagogue that once stood on the site was replaced with a mosque, and Jews were barred from entering. Now, in 1967, when Israel gained control of Moras HaMachpelah in Hebron, the Israeli government chose to allow Jews and Muslims to pray in the structure built atop the cave. The government apportioned the larger section of the building to Muslim worshippers and a smaller section to the Jewish worshippers, hoping to have a peaceful coexistence.
Never works.
The area was regularly marred by violence. Radical Muslims carried out all kinds of terrorist attacks upon Jewish worshippers, and these attacks have persisted from 1968 until today. Reflecting on this ongoing territorial dispute, the Rebbe noted, the Muslims argue that the Jewish people cannot take a part of the patriarch's cave since the Muslims have been there for 1,000 years. However, from this argument of antiquity itself, the opposite is actually demonstrated. The Muslims cannot take part in the cave because it belongs to the Jewish people for over 1,000 years before Islam even came to be.
Yeah.
So what's interesting, and we've talked about this before, but if you shout a lie repeatedly long enough and loud enough, people buy it. And this is just another example. How can you claim our ancestral homeland when Judaism preceded? Is it your ancestral? Yes, it's your ancestors as well. But you can't say we don't have a right to it. That's just crazy. So, if you review all the historical facts, the question who has a legitimate claim to the land, it always comes back down to a narrative, a story. And which story do you tell? Which story do you live by? And why should somebody accept your version, your story, right? So let's explore some of these narratives underlying the competing claims to on the individual level, as well as the conclusions drawn from each perspective. So the Islamist narrative, the story that they tell, right? According to the Islam narrative, the land of Israel is Islamic land, which belongs to what is referred to in Islam as the Ummah, or the global community of Muslims. And as such, it is part of Dar al-Islam, the domain of Islam. Although Islamist doctrine allows for Jews to reside within the boundaries of the Muslim-governed Israel, it precludes Jewish sovereignty over the land. So let's quote from their own discussions, right? Osama bin Laden, encapsulated this narrative in his open letter to American people, quoting Osama bin Laden: "If you want a real settlement that guarantees your security in your country, America, and safeguard your economy from being depleted in a manner similar to our war of attrition against the Soviet Union, then you have to implement a roadmap that returns the Palestinian land to us, all of it, from the river to the sea.
I haven't heard that before.
It is an Islamic land, not subject to be traded or granted to any party." Now, based on certain interpretations of Islamic texts, Jewish historical claims there's no room for a Jewish state anywhere in Israel. And that's why they say from the river to the seas, Palestine will be free, Judenrein, cleaned of any Jews. This is the narrative held and propagated by Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Republic of Iran, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, many Islamic groups in the Middle East and the world over. So, in order to appease the Islamists and avoid confrontation, certain parties and Western nations are willing to make concessions at Israel's expense.
That's right.
So that's the Islamic narrative. And they say it loud and long and strong. And it's insane. Let's talk about the Western social justice narrative.
All right.
And I want to look at that for a little bit, right? The Western social justice movement emphasizes achieving justice through peace, often viewing conflicts as a struggle between powerful oppressors and weaker oppressed groups. And it's the supporters of this Western social justice movement typically side with those that are seen, or that they see, as disadvantaged, which obviously in this case, Palestinian group is the disadvantaged group because they're the victims, which results in negative portrayals of Israel, right? But from this outlook, even terrorism is explained as a response to injustice. And the solutions are sought by addressing the root causes, not military force. But this approach often underestimates the groups motivated by rigid ideology or hatred, those groups whose goals go beyond grievances and they're not interested in compromise. We see Israel has reached out to try and compromise from the very beginning of two lands, right? But despite the inherent contradictions between this Western social justice ideology and the Islamic narratives, the folks believing in Western social justice can be exploited to serve the Islamic interests, weaponizing their ideology against Israel. So although the Western social justice ideology has its own flaws, the Islamic interest can use that to turn the world against Israel. The Western social justice narrative vocally declares that Judea and Samaria are occupied territories. Taking that to its logical conclusion, this perspective suggests that Israel, due to its perceived power and success, has no legitimate claim to exist.
Yeah.
Moreover, the fact that many Jews lived in Europe for most of the past millennium, and that the United Kingdom, a historically colonizing nation, granted the land to Jewish people, allegedly taints the Jewish possession of Israel, and we're labeled as European colonizers. So obviously, this Western social justice narrative implies that Jews should be forced out of Israel. And in a way, this narrative is actually worse than the Islamic one. This is particularly true given the fact that many Muslim countries have moved on from the Palestinian issue, quote, as a cause for conflict and are interested in establishing peaceful relations with Israel, rather than using the Palestinians as a tool to undermine Israel's legitimacy. Nonetheless, the Western social justice warrior, in their various incarnations, refuse to let the issue rest. They're perpetuating the conflict rather than facilitating a resolution where all parties can live and maybe even live in peace and prosperity. So taken to its absurd conclusion, this concept of the Western social justice, right? That would suggest that many established nations, particularly the United States, should close up shop and give control back to indigenous people.
Mm-hmm. And of course, they came across the Bering Strait from God knows who.
Yeah. So again, the whole concept of it's all about Western social justice, the whole concept is ludicrous at best.
It is. Well, I think in all of this, we have rediscovered one of the Jewish tribes, namely the tribe of Meshuggahs.
Okay. So another narrative, another storyline, right, is international law.
Yeah.
Some people want to argue that Israel's right to exist is based on recognition from international community. And of course, now we start quoting the UN resolution that ratified Israel's establishment. But this narrative is actually pretty weak. It doesn't actually help us at all. While the UN endorsed the State of Israel's formation, it has since called for Israel to return to its precarious pre-67 borders, which just totally destroys Israel's security. Basing Israel's right to exist on approval of the UN and international consensus exposes us to existential threat. Over the years, the Lubavitcher Rebbe often discussed the perils of the Jewish people basing their claim on international recognition. The Rebbe said, although one Gentile, Balfour, asserted that a Jewish homeland should be established, 140 other Gentiles maintained the opposite position. Who determined that this individual, Balfour, possessed the authority to make such a decision? This assertion is indeed accurate. Balfour does not have the right to determine that the land of Israel belonged to Jews. It is actually a matter of God granted it to them, the Canaanite nations, when he so desired, and he took it from them and bestowed it upon us according to his will. The Rebbe routinely would discuss the UN's anti-Israel resolutions.
Yep.
For example, the UN General Assembly Resolution 3379, adopted in 75, which determined that Zionism is a form of racism and racial discrimination.
Yeah, well.
UN Resolution 242, adopted unanimously by the UN Security Council in 67 in the aftermath of the Six-Day War, called for the withdrawal of Israeli armed forces from the territories occupied and the termination of all territorial claims. Clearly, Israel cannot rely on the international community for claims of legitimacy.
Nope, can't.
From 2015 to 2022, The United Nations General Assembly adopted resolutions on Israel 140 times. They did resolutions on Israel. And the countries of the rest of the world put together, only 68. Similarly, from 2002 to 2022, the UN Human Rights Council adopted 99 resolutions against Israel, but only 61 against Syria, Iran, Russia, and Venezuela combined.
Yeah.
And it's kind of difficult to understand this by referencing Israel's behavior. What you have is a confluence of prejudice coming together at the UN. There's most obviously the Muslim world takes side with its co-religionists. Now you combine with that the leftists and the third world countries who, just like any society, is seen as powerful and successful. And then add to that old-fashioned anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And you get an international community that cares more about the sins of Israel than that of everyone else in the world combined.
And add to that the European nations being really now almost overrun by Muslim immigrants, legal or illegal, and that shows. That
So let me
shows.
give an example. Let me give an example. Imagine if you're living in a town and the police are always trying to arrest you for jaywalking and trying to get you a prison sentence for it, right? At the same time, they ignore the crimes of murderers and rapists.
Yep.
It would be irrational to think, well, if only I stopped jaywalking, they'd leave me alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's clear the cops are out to get you. Jaywalking is just a pretense. Now, I'm going to say, even miraculously, Israel has somehow managed to avoid UN sanctions and even possible military interventions. And largely, that comes to the fact that the U.S. has veto power in the Security Council. So this precarious nature of relying on international community and international law to legitimize Israel's existence is a very, very tenuous. Vulnerability to shifting global dynamics, political whims. It doesn't even make sense, right? Setting the United Nations aside, the forces that facilitate the establishment of the State of Israel are relevant only while they're in power.
Yep.
Other global actors, such as the United States, disregard the UN, which diminishes the impact of its complaints. So relying on international community for legitimacy is insane.
Yes, it is.
And it has been historically proven as a really bad idea.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's talk about realpolitik. The term realpolitik is a political approach that emphasizes pragmatic, material factors like national interests and power over ideologies, ethics, or moral principles. So perhaps having a claim to the land of Israel simply actually doesn't matter. Several Muslim countries, including Egypt, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Morocco, they've established political relations with Israel because it's in their geopolitical interests. So maybe having a claim doesn't matter. Other Arab countries cooperate with Israel and have even defended it. Saudi Arabia's defense against the Yemenite Houthi missile attack in 2023. The Iran-launched unprecedented missile and drone attack against Israel, and Jordan's Air Force participated in taking down the projectiles, opened up its airspace to Israeli weapons and warplanes. Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, they have found it in their political exits that, the support
self-interest.
Self-interest. That's it. Self-interest, right? Realpolitik. Israel serves the United States' interests as a friendly country located in a strategically important region. And Israel serves as the ballast against extremist groups in the Middle East. So perhaps, as long as Israel serves other countries' political interests, whether or not its existence is technically justified is irrelevant. since other countries would in any case refrain from attacking it and might even defend it. So far, it seems that the most stable narrative underlying Israel's right to exist is might makes right.
Yep.
It can exist because it serves the interests of powerful nations. But that's pretty precarious too, because national interests can evolve over time. So we've looked at a series of backstories or narratives to say why Jews belong in Israel, why Jews have the right to Israel. We've looked at these backstories, and every one of them has flaw, some more than others. So there's only one narrative. There's only one narrative that is stable and stands the test of time and real politics. And that's the Torah's narrative. So we look to the Torah, and the very first verse in the Torah. So Rashi, the term Rashi is an acronym. Rashi is an acronym for Rav Shlomo Yitzchaki, who was the foremost Jewish biblical commentator. The very first verse of the Torah, Rashi questions if the Torah is a book of Jewish law and wisdom, why does it begin with stories? Rashi comments on, in the beginning, God created the heaven and earth. Why the storyline? Rashi comments, God declared the power of his actions to his people, giving them the inheritance of the nations. When the nations of the world will say to the people of Israel, now Rashi wrote a couple hundred years ago, during the Crusades, right? He wrote, when the nations of the world will say to the people of Israel, you are robbers because you conquered the land of the 7 Canaanite nations, Israel will respond, the earth belongs to God. God created it, and he gave it to whomever he saw fit. By his will, he gave it to them, the other nations, the Canaanite, and by his will, he took it from them, and he gave it to us. So let's think about Rashi's comments, right? Our ability to influence nations lies in our commitment to speaking truth. We must offer the response that Rashi gave hundreds of years ago. Rashi intended that his response should be publicized even in his own time, when there were severe challenges against the Jewish people. Although Rashi knew that the Jewish people's enemies were capable of, he showed that we can quiet even them with the Torah's teachings. Rashi lived during the time of the Crusades, a period that the Jewish people they suffered immense atrocities committed against them, like similar to Nazi Germany. May such things never occur. Yet, despite the adversity faced by Jews, Rashi instructed his elementary students, who are just beginning their study of Torah, that the non-Jews will accuse you of being robbers, of conquering territories, and we have to know that God declared the power of his deeds to his people, and he gave them the inheritance of the nations. So Rashi is explaining to his young students that the importance of being able to articulate his Jewish identity and Jewish understanding extends beyond the confines of his school or home. Rashi is emphasizing the child must be prepared to provide thoughtful responses to anyone who inquires about his faith, regardless of the setting or the identity of the person asking. You have to stand strong and tall and say, God gave us this land, period. Rashi empowered his generation and all future generations with the affirmation of the divine promise of our Holy Land, even in the face of oppression. God gave this land to the Jewish people, in a miraculous manner. And as Rashi notes at the beginning of his commentary, he chose to give it to them, and he has chosen now to give it to us. God performed an open miracle to the extent that every Jew and every nation in the world said, God's hand has done this. The Jewish people's victory in the 6-day war, in a completely supernatural manner, God returned the Jewish people's eternal inheritance, not just in the spiritual sense, but in a physical one as well. God took the chosen people, which had been in the possession. God took the chosen land, which was in the possession of idolaters, and he gave it to the chosen people. God promised us the land in the Torah, and he has miraculously returned it to us now. And this is the only reliable foundation of our claim to the land. God told Abraham at the Bris Beina Besarim that his descendants will inherit the land. God reaffirmed that promise to Abram, to Yitzchak, to Yaakov. And when their descendants returned to land, actually entered the land under Yeshua's leadership, the Jewish people conquered it, fulfilling God's promise, and established it as an eternal inheritance. So that's the only narrative that, at the end of the day, is rock solid. Now, people may believe or not believe that. We're going to talk about it in a second. But let's talk about verbiage for a second. You'll often hear we talk about Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. We don't refer to the state of Israel. And that's not just semantics. It's actually critically important. Because given that the Torah's narrative is the most stable basis for Jewish claim to the land, as we refer to the Israel as Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, we're referring back to the biblical narrative that underscores our claim to the land, that is rooted in an ancient divine promise, not in this concept of modern nationalism. We must confidently assert our claim to the land as truth, without any qualifications, with childlike sincerity. This is just it. Eretz Canaan was given to us as an inheritance to Amcha Yisrael, the people of Israel, starting at the Bris Beina Besarim with Avram. If we use the name, the biblical name is land of Israel. If we use that as an established designation, we've been doing that for thousands of years. So the land is referred to in the Torah, in the Bible, the 5 books of Moses. That's a common parlance of the Jewish people from young to old. It's not a matter of a vote or majority decision. It is what we referred to the Holy Land as such for thousands of years. The biblical narrative not only clarifies our claim to the land for ourselves, but also it helps others understand and acknowledge it. For those who hold the Bible with high regard because of their faith or aspect of cultural heritage, the assertion of Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, historically belonging to the Jewish people, is particularly impelling. The Bible's influences evident in the global recognition of Israel as Eretz HaKodesh, the Holy Land. The Holy Land refers back to the Bible, where it's described as a land upon which the Lord your God's eyes are upon from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So when we talk about the Holy Land, we talk about the land of Israel, we are using the Bible, the Torah, as the reference, and that is respected across the world in many places. So whether or not the person adheres to the Bible or acknowledges it just as a cultural legacy, it's essential for Jews to confidently assert our claim to Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, not based on international law or the aftermath of the Holocaust, but on a biblical promise. And when we genuinely believe in and assert that claim, if we're strong, it commands respect and support independent of external validation. The strength of our claim on the Torah is that the Torah is irrefutable. we ground our claim solely on the fact that God gave us the land as stated in the Torah, no one can undermine that. And that's encapsulated in the Torah's description of the Jewish people as you are the children of the Lord your God, indicating that children who inherit their parents' assets, the Jewish people, are the rightful heirs to that which God has bestowed upon us. So by adhering to the Torah's narrative, that completely undermines the idea of land for peace. It recognizes Israel as Eretz HaKodesh, a holy land, divinely bestowed upon the Jewish people. It nullifies any governmental authority to negotiate away from this ancestral heritage. This shifts the entire discourse from political bargaining to recognizing a historical and spiritual inheritance that transcends conventional stagecraft. It was actually a very interesting letter. Lubavitcher Rebbe wrote a very interesting letter to the Bnei Bris messenger. And I'm going to read that letter. It says, following Jewish custom, I will begin with a preparatory remark apropos the name of your publication, Bnei Bris Messenger. Bnei is the children, Bris of the covenant messenger. As the name implies, the Bnei Bris Messenger, its purpose is to convey a message to its readers, and through its readers, to the families and friends who are Bnei Bris, children of the covenant. This reference is, of course, to the covenant between God and his people, beginning with the first Jew, our forefather Abraham. According to this covenant, God assured Abraham, unto your seed I have given this land. And God reaffirmed it again with the birth of Isaac and said, I will establish their generations for everlasting covenant. I will give them to you and to your seed after you, the land of your sojourn, Eretz Canaan, for an everlasting possession. Since the Bible is held sacred not only by Jews, but Christians and Muslims, no one can honestly question the Jews' title to the land of Israel. Indeed, in accordance with this covenant, God led our people out of the Egyptian bondage into the promised land, and our people took possession of it, and, since the time of David and Melech, made Jerusalem the eternal capital of their land, long before any of the present-day world capitals came into being. With a brief interlude of 70 years, the Babylonian exile, our people have lived in the land of Israel 1,340 some years, and even after God saw fit to send our people into the present Gullus, exile and dispersion, there's always been, up to the present day, a Jewish presence and settlement in our land. Well, all the Jews throughout the diaspora have longed and prayed 3 times a day for our return to the homeland and everlasting possession. May our eyes behold your return to Zion in mercy. Yet, of late, the title to Eretz Yisrael has been challenged by the very nations who, by force of arms, repeatedly sought to rob us of our everlasting possession. So, he continues in his letter, here is my request. I do not know what you and the editor and the publishers of Bnei Bris Messenger think as individuals about the situation outlined above, nor am I adequately familiar with the position of the Bnei Bris Messenger as advocated in the past. I do believe, however, that a publication that carries the banner Bnei Bris, Children of the Covenant, and which is now in its 84th year, has the primary obligation to carry the message of the divine covenant to its numerous readers, many of whom are leading personalities in various Jewish communities. The message of the Torah of life, the Torah of truth, namely, the land of Israel belongs to us by divine covenant, as indeed is recognized by all who believe in the sanctity of the Bible. The facts of life, the truth, are that Jews are not occupiers or aggressors in their homeland, but that what has passed into our hands is only a restitution of what is divinely ours by divine will and grace, not by any false grace of the United Nations. We cannot afford to be generous and give away any portion of our tiny land in response to the threat of force, since retaining every last inch of this is a matter of vital security for the 3.5 million Jews, men, women, and children, as well as for our Jewish people as a whole. So again, we're re-emphasizing that the only narrative that we really can use, the only narrative that is stable is the Torah narrative. The Torah that says that this is our God-given land. So despite the fact that a Torah-based claim will, all things considered, be more effective when addressing hostile audiences, the Rebbe expressed a skepticism that any argument will move Israel's most staunch opponents. No matter what we say, they're not listening anyway. So why do we have to say it? We have to say this narrative for the long-term impact of our people and the morale of the Jewish youth. Again, quoting a letter from the Rebbe, I do not deceive myself in thinking that arguments of justice and fairness will win over the United Nations, the Vatican, etc. The most influential factor for the Jewish people is to prevail in the morale of the youth, including IDF, the students in the United States, and surely other countries, our Jewish people everywhere. The approach that this is a state of Israel that was founded with the approval of the UN actually harms the vital interests of even the state of Israel to the point that it leads to death. This is what compelled me to speak about these matters. So in other words, the term Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, not the state of Israel refers back to UN approval. We need to get away from that and go back to the biblical point and call it what the Bible calls it, Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. The Rebbe emphasized that educating young Jews to see their connection to the land individually as a God-given heritage stretches back 3 millennia would inspire them to fight for it even more passionately than if their claim were based on some other modern concoctions like the UN Declaration 48. Grounding Israel's significance to the ancient Jewish history is tradition and is the key to instilling an enduring commitment to Eretz Yisrael for the next generation. So, that was pretty long-winded. But tonight we presented, kind of reviewing, right? Tonight we presented a comprehensive analysis of the Jewish historical and spiritual connection to Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. We evaluated and we challenged various contemporary narratives, including the narratives of Islamists, of Western social justice, and international community. And we argued that the Torah's narrative, grounded in divine promise and historical continuity, that is the most stable and legitimate basis for the Jewish claim. This perspective not only reaffirms the Jewish right to the land, but it also provides a moral and spiritual framework for undertaking Israel's existence and defending its legacy in the face of global scrutiny and political upheavals and changes.